So welcome to my bike check for the Deviate Highlander. Just a word of warning, I absolutely love this bike and I have nothing bad to say about it. I am also kind of sponsored by Deviate, so if you don't believe what I'm saying, that's fair enough. But I do urge you to demo one of these and try one for yourself. I feel you probably will agree with a lot of things I am saying. So this is Deviate's new bike. The previous bike was the Deviate Guide. It was a high pivot gearboxed enduro bike. That was fantastic, but slightly limited when it came to a more pedally day or an undulating trail. So Deviate wanted to address that and make a bike that had a much broader appeal. So they have ditched the gearbox in favour of a conventional drivetrain, but they have retained the high pivot point. Now this is a 29er bike. It has a 140mm travel at the back and 160 at the front. You can pair it with a 150 fork if you want, and just to steepen the head angle and make it maybe a little bit more playful than this guy's at the moment. Now Deviate gave me this frame. I chose this blue colour over the yellow because I like to offset things with orange. However, the yellow is also very nice. They only offer at the moment a medium and large. I opted for a large. I'm 6'1", and I find it fits very well. I think they will be coming out with an extra large pretty soon. Good news for people who are a little bit shorter but like to have a long reach. Deviate have intentionally kept their seat tubes quite low, so you can size up if you want. This is a 480mm reach and it's paired with a 430mm seat tube, which is gives you loads and loads of standover height. The head angle at the front is 65.5 with a 160mm fork. Again, remember this is a trail bike, not necessarily a full-on enduro bike. I think it's a kind of good sweet spot. The bottom bracket drop is 28mm, the chainstay is 441, however because of the high pivot in the rearward axle path, which we'll get into in a minute, the chainstay actually effectively lengthens as it goes through its travel. The seat tube angle is 76 degrees, which is not crazy, but it is definitely up there with the modern trends. Yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into geometry and numbers. That doesn't always tell the full story of how a bike rides. So what makes this bike special and why should you choose it over an alternative? Well, the main thing is the high pivot point. Now just a quick description of how a high pivot point works. It effectively allows the rear wheel to travel backwards as well as going through its vertical travel. Now that doesn't sound like a huge, a big deal, a huge amount, but it actually makes a huge difference on the trail. So if you were to hit a square-edged hit on the trail, that force is pushing the back wheel backwards. Now if you have a more regular suspension platform, you are basically fighting against the suspension's design, the way that the wheel wants to go. Whereas with this, the wheel wants to go backwards and each one of those hits just takes that little bit less out your momentum. Long story short, high pivot points carry an insane amount of speed. Add in the larger wheels and you have a very fast bicycle. Now you will notice an extra cog up near the high pivot point, and that is an extra idler wheel. Now the reason why you have to run that when you have a high pivot point is because the rear wheel moves backwards, the chain essentially stretches, or the chain line gets pulled. If it was to have a normal chain line, it would basically snap the chain when it went through its travel. So to run the chain up and over in line with where the high pivot point pivots means that there's no chain growth, or at least very little, and you can actually place that idler where you want. That allows you to tune the suspension kinematics, or more to the point, the anti-squat figures on the bike. As you would expect for a high-end boutique bike, the frame is finished to a very high standard and there are some incredibly neat wee touches all over the bike. from the really nicely integrated internal cable routing for the dropper post to the channel on the underside of the top tube, which essentially gives that internal cable routing look, but actually the rear cables are externally mounted. So that means that you get that nice clean look, but you can actually remove things without having to cut any lines, etc, etc. So a lot easier to work on maintenance wise. Add to that, the fixing points for holding the cables in also happen to be the exact same spacing as a bottle cage mount, which means theoretically you could mount 3 bottles or 3 accessory mounts that take bottle cage spacing bolts. Another really cool thing about this bike is each and every pivot point on it, or where there's a bearing, including the idler, there are grease ports. So you literally put your grease gun to it and pump up the bearings full of grease. That is such a simple thing that I don't know of any other bike manufacturers that do that, but it means that without stripping the bike apart, you can just pump up some grease at set intervals and keep your bike very well maintained. All the bearings are heavy duty as well and have twin wiper seals to protect them from the elements. I believe that the main pivot also has needle bearings, which is an excellent way of spreading a lot of force reliably. So there really is a lot of thought has went into the longevity of this bike. And on the longevity note, a lot of people dismiss high pivot point bikes because of that idler. But Deviate have went to the efforts of massively over-engineering this part. Inset to the rear swing arm is a double wiper sealed bearing that holds one side of the idler wheel. Then on the very heavy duty cage that holds idler in place, there is also an inset bearing. And again, that grease port as well. So any loads that will be put upon the idler are very well spread indeed. Add to that, it is a large size idler. It is an 18 tooth idler, bigger than most, so the drag should be very minimal. So that's the frame. We'll just do a quick overview of the parts that I have spec'd in this. Predominantly Hope parts. Now, I've chosen most of my parts not for ultimate performance, not for lightweight, but just for parts that I won't have to worry about too much in the future. Just fit and forget, reliable, and they just work. So we start with the wheels. I've used the Hope Fortis 30 wheel set. They are incredibly good value. Full RRP is £460 for the full wheel set. I've had Hope hubs on 3 or 4 bikes now, and I've never done so much as replace bearings on them. You just fit them and forget them. Wrapped around the wheels, I have went for something new, a bit of an unknown for me. Went for the Michelin Wild Enduro tyres, front and rear. 2.4, very aggressive tread pattern, and we'll see how I get on with them. Keeping it on the wheels, I have got a 200mm rotor from Hope at the front and a 180 rotor from Hope at the back. They are paired with the Hope E4 brakes. I've had E4 brakes on this bike and my last bike, and I've predominantly run Hope brakes over the years, purely because they are fit and forget. They are very reliable. They don't have the outright power of some brakes. They don't have the lightweight of some brakes, but they do have excellent adjustability, really good feel and modulation, and again, they just last. I've also made a change to my drivetrain. I have run SRAM for a good few years now, and it's been a while since I've had Shimano, but I hear only good things about the Shimano XT 12-speed system, so that is exactly what I went for. I have included the crankset with that and the front chainring. So far, so good. Mounted to my cranks is yet more Hope orange bling. It is the Hope F20 flat pedal. I have only ever run flat pedals, and these ones are a good size. They're not too big, they're not too small, and I've opted not to run the pins in the center of the pedal so that my foot sinks into it, and the grip is fantastic. Hope also provide my bottom bracket and my headset, again for reliability. I have opted to go for a coil shock in this, mainly because to run a coil shock successfully you need a suspension kinematic that is very progressive, which this is. and that matches up with the linear feel of a coil shock. So I thought I'll go coil. It's a little bit heavier. It is 800 grams for this Cane Creek double barrel coil, but I have run the air version of this and was extremely impressed with the tunability and the suppleness of it. So I'm hoping that the coil will be a next step up from that. Keeping it on suspension, we have the Fox Performance Elite 36 on here right now. This is not the fork that belongs in here. I have had to pinch this off my pivot, and I am waiting on my Fox 36 factory, the new one with the bleed valves in the back and stuff like that. It's in the post. Coronavirus has held that delivery up. As I said before, this bike has quite a short seat tube, and therefore I have opted for a 1UP Components dropper post at a 210mm drop. This bike is one of the few bikes where you can run that fully up and fully down, and it all fits in. The insertion length on this particular frame is 330mm. When you're sat in the saddle, you've got the full efficiency, perfect climbing seat position, and then you can tuck it right out of the way when it comes time to descend. I'm a big fan of having a lot of standover height and a lot of free rein to move the bike around underneath you. Sat on top of that is a fabric something seat. It's one of the ones with the carbon rails. Deviate were kind enough to give me that, as they had some in stock and they are not going to be replenishing that stock. It's a seat I've run before on the guide and I've been more than happy with it. No real issues, so I have nothing against running that on my new bike. So we're almost done. It's just now to the cockpit. So for the cockpit, I've kept this the same as what I am running on my other bike, a Pivot Shuttle, along with the pedals. The only thing that's changing the contact points is the seat. On the Pivot I run a WTB one. So we have a Renthal 35mm stem, 35mm clamp, 35mm reach, and that is on a Race Face Atlas 810mm bar in alloy. I wanted to get the full blingy, shiny orange that I have run in the past, but they no longer make them, so I had to compromise and get the black one with the orange etching on it. Moving out to the end, we have Ergon GA2 grips. They are the fatter version. I have fairly large hands and I find that the fatter grips are less fatiguing over a day. And that's all topped off with a Hope Head Doctor stem cap as well. So that's it. This is a basic video just to show you the components that I have chosen and I'm running. We will see over time how these things last, what fails, what keeps going. Yeah, I am super excited about this bike. I've already ridden it a couple of times now. I wanted to make this video first, but I just couldn't help myself. I just had to get out and ride it. But I'm pleased to say that instantly on my local trails, I've went about as fast as I ever have, and I felt way more in control than I ever have on these trails as well. So to get that on my first couple of rides, I know that once I get things a little bit more dialed in, suspension tuned up, maybe a couple of ergonomic adjustments, yeah, I think I'm destined for some very fast times. I've already had to completely recalibrate my brain, basically to brake earlier for corners, because I'm coming into everything so much faster than I'm used to. And I felt that my old bike, the Deviate Guide, was very fast in that respect, but this thing just takes it to another level. In fairness, my local trails are more suited to a trail bike than a full enduro bike, so that does play into the bike's hands. But so far, yeah, extremely excited about it. If you have any questions about this bike, please feel free to get me in the comments. I do try and answer every single question or every single comment, so if you want any information, I'm here to help. So thanks for watching this one, and hopefully you stick around and you'll see my first ride impressions and a review at some point down the line. Ciao!